Hello, everyone. My name is Katie, and I'm the host of the Creative Species podcast. Although I have an art degree and work at an art museum, I am still someone who has struggled with my relationship with creativity. I'm curious about how others, whether professionally or personally, have weaved creativity into their daily lives. So, this project is a series of interviews with people around me from all different disciplines that will share their story, aspirations, opinions, hot takes, and advice. So, here we go. Hello, welcome to the podcast. Today, my mom is here, and she is the one who introduced me to the arts. And until I was an adult, I realized how lucky I was to have this exposure. She still supports me in my creative pursuits while also doing her own. We talk about creativity in retirement and also her observations as a mom to me who pursued a degree in art and career in art. And here's a little bit more background about her. She was raised in Bay City, Michigan, and graduated from Bay City Central High School and then Central Michigan University with a degree in business. She is a 40-plus year career banker that consisted of 10 years in branch banking and 30 years in human resources. She is a former Sunday school teacher, board member, and past president of the YWCA Great Lakes Bay Region, former member of the Bay Concert Band for 10 plus years, and was secretary for 2 years, currently volunteering on the finance committee of her church and also at the Saginaw Art Museum and Gardens, where I work, in a variety of capacities. And she's been retired for almost 5 years and loving it. I call her mom, but here's Gail. Hey, mom, welcome to the pod.
Katie, thanks for the invite.
Yes, so you're the first non-educator slash also non-arts professional coming onto the pod. So I think that'll be an interesting perspective. And also, I might ask some maybe more personal questions about raising two creative kids because, and if you were watching these in order, the last podcast was with my brother Chad, who also studied music. I studied visual arts. But before we get into that, just to kind of set the scene, is how do you define creativity?
That's a good question because I think it is a lot of things. I think that creativity is something that is the result of a or I shouldn't say it's a result, it's a process really of creating a product of some sort. So, an example could be a creative writing. It could be painting. It could be performing music. It could be dancing. It could be in live theater. So any of those things is, to me, is being creative. And that's the process of going through that and then either displaying it or performing it is the product that comes from being creative.
Do you feel like there always has to be a product for it to be creative?
I don't think it's anything that anybody needs to actually show. It could be individual and it could just be for that person that's doing it. Sure.
So I guess in that sense of if that's your definition of creativity or as being a creative person, do you feel like you're a creative person?
I do. I do very much.
Do you feel like everybody is able to be creative?
I do. I do.
Do you think dad is creative?
I do.
Oh.
I do. Not in the traditional sense that we would think that he would sit down and he would uh paint or he would um get up on the stage and perform or anything like that. But I think that he is. And I think, you'd mentioned at the beginning, I'm like the first person that's a non-educator or, came from my career is in business. So when we're talking about being creative, it's also when you're in your job, when you're in your career. And I think that I guess long story short is that, yeah, I think that he is creative because I think he had to be creative in his job uh, to solve problems, to anticipate things. You have to be creative in a
Yeah,
non-traditional sense.
Right. And I mean, I think creativity is maybe the big umbrella term of outside the box thinking, problem solving, and then there's a portion of that are people who are artistically creative, which is more of the focus of what we're talking about. So kind of going off of that, just starting chronologically. So, I mean, you ended up doing business as your career. Dad also did not do an artistic profession. So, and you both knew each other all your life. So going back to when you were a kid growing up in the 60s, was art part of your daily life? Was it even brought up as a hobby? Was it ever considered an option as a career for you and at that time?
It was not a focus, or my parents did not, certainly gave me the freedom to do it, but didn't necessarily push me that way. No. The thing that I remember, earliest memory that I have other than I like to color and coloring books and things like that, is that I must have been in the, I don't know, sixth or seventh grade. And I think it was in a magazine or something where it said, Send away for this art test." And I did, and I completed the test, and then you'd get like a review that would come back. Somebody would look at it, critique it, and then send you as I recall, it was like a letter or something like that, and critiqued it. And that was probably my first thought of it. And what I had to do is I had to recreate, or they showed you a picture of this dog, I can remember, and the dog was like in mid gallop, and you had to draw that, or, redraw it or copy it or whatever. And then you also, on another page, it was like a free page. And I remember doing like a flower arrangement or something like that. And I just really enjoyed that. So that's the earliest memory that I can think of in doing that. I don't recall taking any like art classes or anything in high school, although I did take a drawing class in college as an elective. I did do that.
Was the arts a part of your household at all? Is it something that any of you, that your parents said anything about, or if you tried to pursue something, was that encouraged or discouraged?
Let's let me answer this too, because we were talking a little bit, or I was talking a little bit about it's not just drawings and things like that, but I started to take up an instrument. I started playing the clarinet in the sixth grade, and that was encouraged by my parents. Not that they played a musical instrument. My mother really liked music, though I can remember her playing uh, albums in the house. She'd put a record on and she would play music. She also listened to the polka hour on Sunday mornings. But yeah, I think I must have come home from school and said, "Hey, they were at school today and they were talking about instruments or whatever." And I don't know, I was fitted for the clarinet, and that kind of was the takeoff of that part of, if you want to talk about creativity in music, that's been a love of mine for my whole life.
But it was always a hobby,
Always a hobby.
not not a career.
No, I wasn't going to major in performance on my clarinet or anything like that. No.
Which I think is still so valuable. And I think it's important. I think it's important. Of course, I'm biased on for everybody to have some sort of creative outlet, in some type of way. So if they don't have that in their career, finding that in their personal life. So I guess, like I said, moving kind of chronologically a little bit. So you as a young person are playing the clarinet, maybe drawing a little bit, but then of course you became a mom and have had, and then was into your career where you're working 40 hours a week. So how did your creativity change? Did you have time for that, or was that a priority at all for you?
I think I was able to carve out pockets. I can't say that it was a continuous stream because one of the other things that I picked up when I was in high school was learning how to crochet. And I learned that from my great grandmother. She loved to crochet and she showed me how to crochet. So I would pick up things. I mean, I crocheted a little bit when I, was first married, and I might have picked it up again when you and Chad were, little whenever I had time. But there was a time there when the two of you, it took up a lot of time. It was hard to carve out things. And so I really think I had more time to do those types of things later in my life.
Do you feel a difference now that you're able to do those things freely all the time?
Oh, I do. I do. It's yeah, it's a whole different ball game. It's that days are so different when you're working and you're keeping house and you're s- taking kids here and there and everywhere and helping with homework and doing the laundry, there's not a lot of time sometimes to do that. But I think I think that it was hit and miss. It was hit and miss.
Because that's the thing that's hard. And that's something, I mean, I'm not a mom, but I do work full time and getting my master's degree and all these other commitments that I make. And it feels like, well, I guess the best way to say is pulling from this quote. So right now I'm reading through The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. So a 12-week course that's independent, but I'm doing it with a group on either discovering or recovering your own creativity, and it's also tied to spirituality. But one of the things she says is it's to some extent creativity is not a luxury. And that really hit home for me because it does feel like creativity is something that I do when I have time. Of course, yeah, I have to keep house. I have to take care of myself. I have to go to work. And if I have time, maybe I'll get to making something when I wish that was something that was more integrated into my life and felt like more of was a necessity.
I agree. I think if you have the discipline to carve out the time, maybe it's only 30 minutes. If you have that discipline, that's wonderful. If you can make that happen.
I just feel a lot of guilt because I
Yeah.
don't see that as something as I could be spending my time in more valuable ways. Like logically, I don't think that's true, but when it comes to the moment, it feels that way. But
Hmm.
but I definitely feel like kind of going back when me and Chad were kids, I think that was very much something that we valued and spent a lot of time doing. And of course, when you're a kid, you have a lot more time. But I think that was also fostered because of you and dad. And I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about how you kind of fostered that environment for creativity. And I mean, did you ever expect that doing what you did was gonna turn out the way it did with me and Chad, both ending up in arts education careers?
No, I would never, to answer your question, no, I never would have guessed. One of the things that, and as a parent, sometimes you think you didn't get to do something, so if you have the opportunity and the means to do so, you may you want your child to be able to experience those things. So one of the things that I kind of always wanted to do was learn how to play the piano. Well, didn't get to do that, but we worked it out that we were able to introduce Chad to that. I think he was probably fourth grade, and what were you, second grade or something like that, where we were able to introduce the piano to you. The other thing that I always wanted to do, and that I never did, not that I couldn't do it as an adult now, but was to take dance. And so that was another thing that we thought, well, I'd love to. introduced Katie to dance. So the third example that I can give is that I love reading now. I love to sit and read, and I can read for hours, hours and hours. But I wasn't that interested in it, and I wasn't that good at reading and comprehension. So the third example I give is that if you can remember, how many times did you go on a Saturday morning to the public library and go to story time? And I think that experience hopefully was going to, one, make you a better reader, but the other thing is that you can get so creative in books and storytelling. Your mind can just imagine you're in that story. And I just think that's cool.
And also just, I remember going to a lot of theater shows too, and,
Live theater, love live theater, yeah.
and a lot of shows that were geared towards kids, and we were getting exposed to that as well. And I do feel very lucky that I got to do all these things. And I don't remember ever being asked to do dance or asked to do piano lessons or something. I was just putting them. Um, and
True.
I will say, I did not like taking piano lessons. I'll circle back to that in a second, but it is kind of funny though, because when I met a lot of my artist friends when I was working in North Carolina, it was just so funny because we'd be talking and I'd say something like, "Oh yeah, I did dance for 10 years." And they'd be like, "Oh, okay." And then there'd be a piano and I'd start playing, "Oh yeah, I can play this song on piano." And then and then yeah, I took art classes and learned how to do this. And then they'd all be like, "Katie, what haven't you done?" I'm just, or I was in plays. I guess I just did it all. And
You did.
I think it's made me a well-rounded person. And I think that it also, I think gave me a lot of confidence. I don't think I had a lot of confidence going through puberty, which I guess who doesn't, or who does. And I think doing the arts helped me tremendously. But going back to the piano and kind of also comparing, I know you love us both equally, but comparing like me and my older brother of 4.5 years, what maybe difference did you see us with our creativity? And also, because sometimes I think part of it is the reason I took piano lessons was because Chad took piano lessons. So now I have to do that. And I feel like there was quite a long time, and maybe it wasn't clear that I did not like this thing. So I'm not sure why you kept me in it. But, or even band, like you did band in high school, Chad did band in high school. And for part of me, I don't regret being in band, but I think there's a part of me that also thought I was expected to also be in band. And like I say, no regrets, but I just think about that a little bit too, that precedent that he set as my older brother. And just, yeah, that, if you want to comment on that or any, like the difference you saw in us as kids.
Yeah, I never really, that was never really the plan, or, was never something that expected. I just knew, I just knew that the experience that I had in band was that it was like a club. It was just a safe place. You had friends built in. And that I put a lot of value in that. But yeah, it wasn't the plan that you should, follow in your brother's footsteps, so to speak, because you did other things. He didn't dance. He didn't, he did a little bit of directing as far as plays, but I don't know that he ever was really in a play. You also, I think, did more sport type things. Yeah, I guess I just never really thought about it that way, Katie.
I just remember because Chad and I, our rooms were right next to each other, so we shared a wall. And I remember being in elementary school and Chad listening to classical music. To me, looking back, he showed signs very early on of being passionate about music.
I agree.
I don't know if
I
you saw that with me at all.
and I think your love was actually in art. I knew that right early on that yours yours was art, his was music.
And fast forwarding then too, so Chad goes on to major in music education, but I did not major in art education. I just majored in art. And I think that most, maybe not most, but I think a lot of parents might react differently if their child comes home and says, "Hey, I'm gonna study art. I'm gonna major in art," because I think, like, when I told people that, a lot of the responses were, "What are you gonna do with that?" So I don't know if you ever had any thoughts about that. I mean, if you did, you never imposed them on me, which I appreciate, but did you ever were you ever worried about that?
Yes. Fast answer, yes.
Okay, say more.
Um, it's not that I thought, what are you going to do with that? It was more, how are you going to use it? Not what are you going to do, but how are you going to use it? So I think any parent is kind of like, you really want to have your children be able to earn a living, right? So so coming from my generation, and I wouldn't say I'm risk adverse, but I'm looking for the sure road, right? So to me, it would have been, like you said, it would have been art education. You would have been able to do your art, but as an art teacher, there might have been a little bit more, in my mind, not that it's true, but in my mind, probably more stability and more of a sure thing. So, but that was kind of probably naive on my part because again, I didn't come from that area. I focused on business and it was numbers and it was 40 hours a week and sitting in an office and just cranking out the work. And I didn't know what was available, what types of jobs were available in art. So shame on me.
So you never questioned me though. I don't think you ever said, "Oh, why not art education?" or "Why not this?" Like I don't really remember you too much trying to change my mind.
I thought we had one discussion about that, but I wasn't going to, it wasn't my mission to change your mind. My mission, my mission would be to support what you want to do.
Which is very appreciated. I mean, it all worked out.
Yes. Yes, it did very well.
Yes, but I mean, but I feel like, and I don't have any regrets, but I feel like you and Dad did watch me struggle. And I mean, I was pretty happy with moving around and like doing different things, but it was not a clear path of like Chad, I'm going to school for music education. I'm going to be a teacher. My path wasn't a clear thing from you study this, you do this.
So there's not a wrong way to achieve your goals. Sometimes it's going sideways, and you did go sideways a few times, and that was okay. That was okay. I think you needed to do that because of the way that you learn and the way that you are open to experiences, much different than the structured approach that I think Chad did and was probably more comfortable with.
For sure. And I think for me, I don't think I ever wanted to be an artist necessarily. I enjoy making art in some capacity, but I think felt more comfortable when I did art history and museum studies because I feel like that also grounded me on what I was going to do what I was going to do my art with. So it wasn't too nebulous, but I think the work that I did was I worked in schools, and then I worked as a teaching artist, and I worked in museums and nonprofits and things like that. So I had that flexibility, and yeah, I kind of just did want to just figure it out before I had that more settled down structure, which so I like what I did, but I know that I have caused some gray hairs.
But I think that served you well. I think all those experiences really brought you to this point at this time and have you be the happiest that you've been in for a long, long time.
Definitely. So this is my one last question because about me, because we're not supposed to be talking about me, talking about you. So I'll ask this last question, then we'll take a short break. But did anybody ever say anything to you? If, like, for example, if you were talking to a stranger or a friend and you said, "Oh yeah, my son's studying music, my daughter's studying art," were they ever like asked, "Oh, what are they going to do with that?" Or was that ever something that was judged?
Never. I don't remember anybody ever questioning it. Nope.
That's great.
Yeah, I think so too.
I love that. With that, let's take a break. So we talked about growing up and motherhood and how creativity weaves into all of that. But now your kids are out of the house, you are retired, you are not working, and you kind of alluded to this earlier a little bit how you're spending your time. But how does that play a role in your life now than it hadn't before? And what does your day to day look like?
I think that when you're retired, that you need to make a choice, several choices actually. And for me, volunteering and doing things that just make me that just I just find joy in is important. So I can find joy in, as I mentioned before, reading. I can find joy in pulling out a puzzle. I can sit and crochet and love to give things away uh, after I'm completed the project, the crochet. I love to recently, paint rocks on places where I've been, and that brings me a lot of joy. So I think in retirement, that has just been a natural fit for me. Volunteering with different organizations or with my church, I find joy in that. I love to be able to give back. I think that's part of who I am. I've been fortunate and I enjoy doing those things, not only for myself, but to benefit my community or benefit others as well.
Because that's the other thing too. So I work at an art museum. I don't think I ever asked them, but both my mom and dad have volunteered at the art museum. And I think it's very cool to see you, 'cause what you've been doing is volunteering on the field trip, so taking kids around the museum, getting them inspired by art, coming to our family programming and teaching the art. There's great photos of you that are all over our museum literature now of you teaching kids crochet. And so how does and I said I love to see it, but for you, how does that feel to, like I said, you learned crochet from your great grandma and now can pass that down? Because I guess it's just skipped to me. Sorry.
Uh, I just think that if you have those desires, those talents, you need to share them. Just Just share, and you'll find that you'll get twice as much back as to what you're giving. I've met friends through volunteering. I love, you're absolutely right. I love to see the children when they come into the studio and they've made something. I couldn't tell you what it was, but they are so proud of it and they bring it to me, or some children have even given me their project or their painting and said, "Here, this is for you." I said, "Oh, great. I'll put that in my house. That's great." So you just get back twice as much.
Yeah, I think that, like I said before, being an artist isn't my goal. I'm very much more passionate about creating a community in the art museum and getting kids and their parents to explore art and get excited and feel that confidence and just feel fun in creating. And so that's the best feeling to me. More than me making art, I get a better feeling from seeing me showing a kid, hey, why don't you try these oil pastels or something, and them loving it and being so happy with what they make. That fills me up way more
I agree.
in anything that I could make. So you also said that you like just crocheting and just giving things away, which is so funny when we're all together and you just pull out 50 dishwash cloths and
I
like
know.
10 blankets, like, oh, who wants some?
Yeah, I
Which is
do.
which is which is really nice to be able to just you're just making with no maybe intention of like who it's for or anything, just making just with the intention of at least just giving it away to someone else, not just hoarding everything that you make. So, has anyone ever said to you, if you're familiar with the term side hustle, so many I've heard that said to me too, like, why don't you make this a side hustle? Why don't you sell these? So what is your response to that when people say that?
Yes, people have said that. And that's great. I mean, I like to go to craft shows and I like to walk around and I like to look at what people are making. That's just not my motivation, I guess. That's just not the space that I'm interested in working in. I'd rather just for pleasure sit and in the evenings as I'm watching television and crochet a washcloth on an hour and put it aside. I've done a few blankets for people, like baby blankets, where I know that somebody has a little one on their way. I've also been asked a couple of times to make baby blankets for someone else to give as a gift. They're a little bit different sizes, but one of the things that I have done too is made like lap blankets just for like seniors that might be in nursing homes or something like that, where they just, have it on their lap just to kind of keep them warm a little bit. But you're right. I just like to make it and I just like to give it away.
Yeah, because I think that's just something when you see someone that's good at something and is producing something, I think that at least in my generation, that's like one of the first things that people ask now is it's just the capitalist way. Hey, how can you make money off of this thing? And I've gotten asked that before if I'm doing my drawings or my books. That's one of the most frequent asked questions is, "Oh, are you on Etsy or do you do fairs or are you selling?" And it's just like, no, I don't know if that's ever my goal. I also just enjoy making gifts for friends and taking maybe some commissions, I guess. Well, they're not really commissions because I guess I don't get paid all the time. But, my friends asking me, "Oh, can you make my vow books for my wedding?" or "Can you make my guest book for my wedding?" and different things like that. And then that's my gift to them. But that feels better to me, and in some ways I feel bad because I feel like I'm not allowed to have it as a hobby because this is something that I studied and it's something that I should be making money off of, and so it's kind of hard for me to do it just for me because it feels like not allowed.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, when you would be, if you were making, then you're kind of like set in, you're obligated. You're kind of set into a a schedule, a work schedule where you need to produce those things for either sale online or at a show that's coming up or something like that. And I think you need to have some volume too. I'm not necessarily that much of volume. I can accumulate a few things, like you said, I can accumulate 50 washcloths, but if I were to go and sit at a booth and sell them, I don't know how that would go.
It requires a commitment and it requires, I think you think of that task differently then, right?
Exactly.
So how do you feel like the difference is?
Yeah, that to me would be work versus the way for me it's pleasure right now, and I would never want to not find the pleasure and be tied to a date or to a number of pieces.
Do you ever feel pressure to get better at it?
No, I don't feel pressure. I do feel that I would like to in my crocheting to be more creative. And so I'm a lot of times Googling different patterns and ways of doing projects. Like Google how to make, I wanted to make mittens. How do I do that? Making slippers. How do I do that? Well, there's a couple of different patterns I found on crocheting slippers. So I do get, I do want to do different variations. I can get a little bored with a certain pattern. So I do look for new patterns.
I mean, keeps it interesting for sure. I just wasn't sure if it felt like a skill that you wanted to get better at, or you're okay with not. I feel like you're always very okay with not being the best at something,
Oh yeah,
which
absolutely.
which I have a complex about me that I like to be the best. And I'm working on that. But because even playing clarinet, because you did also, we didn't talk about this really, playing clarinet in community band for a lot of years as an adult. So
Correct.
having that gap between high school and the last 10 years, but you also being okay with, yeah, I'll be last chair.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I just want to play. I just want to play. And I might not play every note. And I might get a rhythm wrong once in a while. And I might play a sharp instead of a flat. So last year is fine.
That sounds like you're just making a lot of mistakes.
No, just once in a while.
Oh my God. All right, I think that's a great way to end that little part, and we'll take a quick break and we'll finish up with some advice. We're back, and we're gonna end with a couple words of advice. So starting with, do you have any advice for parents and raising creative kids?
I would say to try, certainly talk to your children. Talk to your children and find out what their interests are, what they like to do, and then try to expose them not to everything, but to things that they've shared with you that they would like to try. And maybe things that they haven't thought about that you can introduce to them. So could be just a variety of things, but whether that's sports, whether that's music, whether that's art and drawing, going to museums, going to library, taking a nature walk, taking a nature walk and just finding that peace and looking around you, looking at your surroundings. Um, Sometimes the simplest things, they don't cost anything. Just spending time with your children and or if you don't have children, maybe you have nieces or nephews, maybe there's neighbors that you can be a part of their lives, even if it's just for 30 minutes a week or something like that, or one day a month, or whatever the case may be. Maybe you volunteer at a school nearby.
Yeah, and I think that because if you don't have kids or don't have kids in your life at the moment, I think that spending time with children, because children are the most creative people ever, because they haven't been socialized to be so self-aware and so like they're embarrassed or they don't feel like that shame and that adults do and they're just playing and I think spending time with children always inspires me because I can see the world through their eyes a little bit, so I think it's important to spend time with kids just as an adult.
Well said. Absolutely.
So I guess with that too, you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but then what advice do you have for recent retirees to bring more creative and joy into their life?
If you have an opportunity to look in your community, maybe you're at the library and you see a poster. Maybe you're at a school function someplace and you see a poster, or you are on Facebook and you are going through and you just see things that are happening in the community that you can either partake in as a audience member, or you find that it's a fit for you and it's a passion that you want to do a little bit more. So take a pottery class, take a calligraphy class, go to a summer concert in the park, singing in a choir. Well, what is it that you like to do? You don't have to be great at it, but what do you like to do? And then seek that out. If you try it and you're not feeling the love, then try something else. But just get out there and try.
Yeah, and I think that it takes a lot of bravery to do that, especially I know some people whose spouses may have already passed away
Mhm.
and they're trying to find ways to fill their time and or maybe they do have a spouse, but maybe their spouse is still working or whatever. And it's some people, it's the first time in their life they have to, there's not that structure or they don't have maybe someone to go along with them to give that support. That's the first time they have to really go and do things on their own.
Right?
I don't know if you experienced that at all because, well, you retired after dad, but I feel like you both have some different interests too.
Right. And I remember an individual coming into the museum that recently lost their spouse. And and they just kind of like they like art. And they came into the museum and you start to, if you see that person a few more times, get to know their name, and it's just you can welcome them in um and just make them feel comfortable, and then you don't know where that's going to go then, and oftentimes it can be end up in a friendship, doing things together with somebody that you didn't know before. um and just being kind, I think if you can get out there, even if you've got another female friend or a male friend, or somebody in the neighborhood, and say, hey, have you ever thought about doing this? I'd really like to do it, but I don't want to do it alone. Would you like to come with me? Those invitations are important too.
Definitely. And I know in one of my classes, there's a statistic that says the number one reason someone might not, or excuse me, the number one reason why someone might not attend an arts event is because of price, And then number two is they don't have anybody to go with.
Right.
So
Right.
don't be afraid to ask somebody, but I think I'm definitely a proponent of go and do it on your own.
Right.
So,
Right.
and
You
like
might
you
meet
said,
somebody there.
and you might meet somebody there. And like you said, you just try. You try and you see what sticks.
Mhm.
And don't feel obligated to stick with things you that aren't.
No, no. That's kind of that's the beauty of it.
Anything else to end on?
Wow. You made me think of a lot of things tonight, Katie. So thanks for asking. And no, I don't have anything else to add. I'm enjoying retirement. Enjoying the things that I get to do now that I maybe didn't have as much time to do before. So life is good.
Life is good. Love to hear it. And thanks for still being my mom and helping me paint things when I have to. That was something that we both did today. I've been painting sets of the local community theater. Of course, I can also always rely on my mom and my dad to come help me with my creative pursuits. So,
Absolutely.
and with that, I think that's where we'll end. So, thanks, Mom. Love
Thanks,
you.
Katie. Love you.